machines.
My Lords, it's a pleasure to speak after the noble Baroness. Before I come to my main remarks, I have a question for my noble friend arising from something he said in the course of his introductory speech. He referred to the scope of the bill covering England, Scotland and Wales, and said that if these vehicles crossed the border into Northern Ireland, then they wouldn't benefit from the provisions of the bill. And I wanted to ask him what border he was referring to, because as far as vehicle regulation is concerned, there is, as I understand it, no border, and Northern Ireland is subject to the vehicle regulations in operation in this country. Was it a slip of the tongue, or was it an implication that, in fact, autonomous vehicles, if introduced into Northern Ireland, would be subject to the laws of the undemocratically made laws of the European Union, undemocratic, that is, as far as their application to Northern Ireland is concerned, whose people, of course, have no say in the legislature which will be making those laws. And I really would be very grateful for his elucidation on that. I'm perfectly happy to accept, of course, that it was a slip of the tongue, and that would end the whole matter. But there may be something behind it he'd like to reveal. My Lords, the substance of my remarks, however, turning to the bill itself, is, of course, a piece of work from the Law Commission, and it's essentially to do with warranty and liability and insurance, which is why I thought I would have very little to say about it that was germane to the text of the bill. But I find that most noble lords have had very little to say about those particular issues, and we have wandered, I think very properly and inevitably, into a broader debate about the desirability of automated vehicles and their consequences for other road users. And I have very great interest in that because during much of my life I've been involved in urban design. I'm particularly interested in that is, in the urban consequences. I'm less interested in what happens on motorways and so on, but urban consequences and how our cities are shaped. And indeed I have to admit, I've been in the naughty corner, no doubt, for this, that I have been a great advocate for and implementer of shared spaces, which I would characterise in very different language to that used by my noble friend Lord Holmes of Richmond and the noble Baroness Lady Brinton. So let me offer a few thoughts of my own to add to this pile of imponderables that the bill has given rise to in the course of the afternoon. And most of them do, as I say, relate to the way in which cities work. But first I will say, I do accept, on the basis of my experience of railways, that it is likely that these vehicles will be safer than vehicles driven by a human person. Anyone who doubts this would not get on a Victoria Line train, for example. They would take the Piccadilly Line on every occasion. The Victoria Line train is driven by computers. The Piccadilly Line train is driven currently, sadly, because there isn't enough money, by a human being. But which is the one that arrives with a minute interval between each train, safely, every time? Which is the one that can carry those people because of that frequency, that huge capacity on the Victoria Line, and which is the one that has 3 or 4 minutes interval between the trains, because of course that's necessary, because the driver has to stop, and they can't stop as safely as the computer-driven trains do. And I think here it's worth saying, with every possible respect to my noble friend Lord Naseby, that the comparison with aviation is not an appropriate one. Rail safety is based on the principle that if something is missing, if something goes wrong, if there's something that isn't quite right in the system, the train comes to a stop. The system stops. The electricity is cut off. Whereas that cannot possibly be the basis of aviation safety. Aviation safety, if something goes missing, you can't just stop the plane at 30,000 feet and say we're going to work out what's gone wrong. Aviation safety is all about building all the safety measures in from the outset before the plane ever takes off and making sure that they're working. It's a totally different approach, and I'm assuming that automated vehicles would operate similarly to those to the rail principle. That is, that if something was missing, if they couldn't see something, that they would stop. This might cause inconvenience as indeed it causes inconvenience if a train on the Victoria line stops and people have to work out what's gone wrong. But it is at least a safety measure and a relatively reliable one. I'm very concerned about the point made about the consequences for streetscape made by Lord Cameron of Dillington, and indeed referred to some extent by my noble friend Lord Borwick, about jaywalking. We have spent years trying to take railings out of cities and allow people to cross streets in a more natural human sort of way, to move away from that sort of Le Corbusier dystopia that arose from separating vehicles and pedestrians at every level. It's a sort of a perpetual, unending Barbican vision of our cities. We've moved away from that. And people who want to see that in operation can go to places like Piccadilly itself, which used to be only a few years ago was a motorway, a one-way motorway with barriers all along it, and has been returned to a calm and more attractive street running two ways without all those barriers and so forth. But as the noble Lord rightly points out, the very fact that you can walk in front of an automated vehicle, confident that it will stop, is going to, the manufacturers will very quickly be saying, well, we can't be having that. We're going to have those barriers back. We're going to have designated crossing places for pedestrians, and we're going to have laws that stop them from walking out in front of the cars. Because that risk balance will have changed. I don't walk out in front of cars generally when they're moving, because I worry that they may hit me. But if I know for a certainty they're going to stop, what is to prevent me? I'll just cross the road. And it may be that doing it for fun, as Lord Borwick says, if you're a 6-year-old, pales. I mean, the fun goes out of it after 3 attempts. That may be well the case, but that isn't, of course, my circumstance. My circumstance is I'm not doing it for fun, I'm doing it to cross the road, and I shall do it exactly as I want. So with the noble Baroness, Lady Bennet of Manor Castle, is actually right to make that point. The next thing I wanted to say was about congestion and the consequences of public transport. Imagine 80 pods. I mean, not all of these cars, we're talking about these automated vehicles as if they're going to be private possessions. But of course there's an alternative vision where automated vehicles are communally or corporately owned, and they're sort of pods. They don't belong to you. And you summon them up like an Uber, and they arrive and they take you somewhere, and then they go and park or vanish or find another passenger somewhere. That is an alternative model. Imagine 80 of those lined up, nose to tail, very safely, moving along Piccadilly from Hyde Park Corner up to Piccadilly Circus, each containing an individual passenger. And as I say, bang close to each other, because it will be very safe for the reasons I explained. 80 passengers moving up Piccadilly. What is the difference between that and a bus? A bus takes 80 passengers from one end of Piccadilly to another. Well, I know what you're going to say. You'll say that, these pods, when they get to Piccadilly Circus, they can split off and all go in different directions, and they can take you to your office or the hairdresser or wherever you want to go in that vicinity. But that illustrates really what automated vehicles are addressing, which is the last mile problem rather than the main trunk problem of transport. It is how to get that last mile from the hub that you want something to take you and to be available, but not necessarily all the way along the whole journey. Why would it be attractive to do that? Indeed, why would we encourage it to do that, given both the effects on congestion and the possible consequences of a collapse in demand for public transport? Not total collapse, but a collapse in demand for public transport. Finally, I think I'm just going to make a point about traffic lights. What is going to happen to traffic lights? And why are we still investing in them? I think it's public knowledge, I know it to be true, that Transport for London is planning to spend a very large amount upgrading its extremely comprehensive traffic light system that's rolled out over the years, which still depends on the Scoot technology, that software technology, that's been in use for at least 20 years and possibly longer. So they're thinking of spending a large amount of money upgrading those. But why would anyone ever need traffic lights? Automated vehicles don't need traffic. Traffic lights are there for people like me to look at something terrestrial in front of me, and it's green or red or orange or whatever. But if your motion is dependent on your sensing of where other vehicles are, together with a communication with a satellite at the same time that is, you don't need they won't read traffic lights, they won't need them. What is going to happen to traffic lights? Now, I'm against traffic lights on the whole. They're a complete misery, of course, we all know that. But they do have some uses. And, for example, the uses they do have are helping people cross the roads at junctions and things like that. So what are the consequences for all of this and for the money that we're still spending, even today, on upgrading our traffic light system if we're moving over to an automated vehicle system? I have a feeling, I'm speaking quite late in the debate, and I know there are one or two very interesting speakers to follow. I have a feeling my noble friend the Minister may not be able to deal with all of the questions that we collectively have put to him in the course of his reply. And of course, so I look forward to a more detailed response in writing to some of them, though he may be able to answer the Northern Ireland one. But I think there's a lot that might arise in committee that I hadn't actually expected, and there may be amendments that test the scope of the bill just a little bit, and I look forward to them.